Addiction never affects just the addict. It affects all of us. Recovering from addiction and alcoholism is also a life-changing battle for families dealing with a loved one's addiction. Numerous programs support addicts as they reclaim their lives, while their families face their own challenges without the same guidance. You're listening to Voices in Courage with KL Wells, where we transform the lives of the families and loved ones of addicts and alcoholics from surviving to thriving in the midst of chaos. Tune in as we highlight vulnerable stories of families who have addicted relatives and friends and learn how they have dealt with the challenges of isolation, desperation, and shame. If you are seeking ways to live your best life, then we welcome you into this safe space. Be a part of change today with your host, KL Wells.
Hi there, this is KL Wells, and I am joined once again by Dr. Bill Crawford, one of my favorite people. And we're going to talk about how do you actually, show up and be there and talk with people who are dealing with this disease. Because I think that's one of the major conundrums for people is, who am I in this? And how do I show up? And our natural inclination is to do some things that really don't work. So, it puts us in a bad situation, ourselves and the person that we love the most. So I'm going to turn over to you, Bill.
Thank you. Always fun to connect with you. You're one of my favorite people as well. So this is a nice opportunity. And I'll start out by saying I haven't had nobody in my family has dealt with this, other than the fact that I grew up in an AA home where my dad was a recovering alcoholic, speaker for AA, and my mom was speaker for Al-Anon. So I got kind of, growing up, I got a little bit of both of that perspective, learned a lot about, what you can and can't do. And now what I do is I go around the country talking to mostly leaders about how to be influential with people, because that's a job of a leader. And so as you and I talked at the very beginning, we want to be really careful about thinking, okay, Bill's going to show me how to get this person to stop being addicted,
Right.
All I got to do is say it the right way, and poof, they will just go, well, I just never thought of that. Well, absolutely. I'm just going to stop that nonsense and everything will be great. I'm sure everybody here has probably had some experience of trying to talk to someone who's going down some path that is not good for them. And unfortunately, when you tell them that, they don't say thank you for sharing. They become triggered. And so what we've got to recognize is when someone's dealing with an addiction, they know it on some level. There's a certain amount of maybe denial that I don't want to look at it, but it's not like they have no idea that this particular disease is really kind of messing with their life. And so they've experienced this lack of ability to stop or change or in any way to address it, which then has them feeling less confident about themselves and their own judgment. So when we come and say, listen, hey, I just want to talk to you about this thing. I don't really think it's, whatever we say, it's not like they don't know that. And what now they hear is, okay, now you don't have confidence in me. So advice, this is one of the things I tell parents sometimes, is often our kids will take our advice as an indication that we don't have confidence in them. I was doing a presentation for a group of parents and teenagers, and I said, hey, parents, did you know that when we give our kids advice, it comes across as if we don't have confidence in them? And every teenager's head in the room is doing this. Now, we think we're trying to be helpful, and we are trying to be helpful, but it comes across in a way that undermines their own confidence. So when you got someone who's dealing with the disease and has probably on some level knows it's not good for them, and maybe even has tried to cut back or stop or whatever, and is afraid that if I do, I won't be able to function or whatever the concerns are around that, then us telling them about the problem and giving them advice about how to stop the problem often is not supportive. So what I thought I would do is kind of go through the parts of my 6-step model that I talked about leaders, about how to be influential with people, and kind of tweak it to how do you talk with someone who is struggling with this illness.
Yeah, absolutely. And although you pretty much live in the executive space, because 1 out of 3 families is dealing with this disease, this is in the executive space.
It is.
This is rampant in executive corporate America. And so there will be a lot of people that will be listening to this that are executives and coaching executives. And so how do they show up for their employees? How do they show up for their coaching clients? So there's a deep bench and a lot of different people that will be listening to this that will resonate completely with what you're talking about.
That's a really good point. Actually, when I'm doing my Vistage presentations, my presentations to leaders, and we get to the end and I kind of show them the 6-step model, and then I kind of sit back and I say, okay, what questions do you have about application? It's very common. Someone will say, hey, my son or my brother or my wife or somebody is dealing with, addiction. How do I deal with that? So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So the first step in the 6-step model is to go into the conversation having chosen qualities or characteristics that I want to bring to the conversation, no matter what they say, no matter what they do. So this means looking at, all right, because here's the problem. When we go in and talk to someone who's having a problem, we're worried about them.
Right.
And we go in with that worry. And there's a new science out there called interpersonal neurobiology. Interpersonal neurobiology. It speaks to how one brain affects another brain.
Yeah.
So in my model, I talk about top of the mind, middle brain, lower brain. And when we're in that middle and lower brain, that's where our worry and our anxiety and our frustration comes out, anger, resentment, all those negative emotions. And often when we're going to talk to someone, having a difficult conversation, we go in worried, we go in anxious, we go in not clear, confident, and creative, but from that perspective, that will trigger them. And it will keep us from being effective because it means now we are stuck in this lower 20% of the brain. We do not have access to the knowledge and skills that reside in the upper 80% of the brain. So you want to say, okay, who am I at my best? Right. What are the qualities or characteristics I want to bring to this conversation? Family members, certainly kindness, love, but also a sense of my confidence in them. So you want to be careful about going in worried about their inability to address the problem, because that's going to be bad for everybody. And you also don't want to go in saying, okay, if I do this right, they will respond in a way where I will feel good about. So you're not going in trying to get them to be a certain way so that you feel good about the conversation. What you're wanting to do is to go in and connect with this person in a way that maybe plants a seed or in some ways touches the best of who they are. So step 1 is who am I at my best? And am I willing to take 100% accountability for going into this conversation and staying in what I call the top of the mind, no matter what they say, no matter what they do. I always tell people, if you get into a conversation and you get triggered, that's the time to pause the conversation. Because if we're in the lower brain and they're in the lower brain, I call that banging brain stems. Nobody's listening to anybody. It's just arguing about who's right.
That's great, Bill.
Yeah. So you want to.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about, of course, is, part of our story, and I did not always do this the best. And as I got more aware of what was going on for myself and Sam, I leaned into this space of no matter whenever I saw him, I was going to be consistently delivering the message that no matter what was going on, he was always loved.
Yes.
So the way that I approached it was I wanted to be the love in the room.
Very nice. Because the person on the other side feels they are unlovable because of their experience. And maybe they've, found some money somewhere and took some money and borrowed some money and hadn't paid it back. There's a lot of stuff that maybe has happened in the past that is around the addiction, around the disease, that they feel a lot of shame around.
Yes.
And so what we want to do is go in really clear about who we are at our best and are willing to take 100% accountability for staying that. So when I talk about accountability, I talk about the ability to be counted upon. Accountability is the ability to be counted upon.
I like that.
Yeah. It's not about who's to blame if something goes wrong. And that's where most people think about accountability. They're going to hold you accountable. Oh, well, that's great. Now I'm just waiting to screw up and, be held accountable. So this is about making sure that they can count on us to stay in this loving, positive, affirming mindset, no matter what they say, no matter what they do, no matter what they've done. So it's all about that. That, by the way, that's a whole lot easier said than done. So,
oh yeah.
So it might not be a bad idea to practice this with someone,
Yes.
either on the mirror or with you or with somebody where that other person can play that role of that resistant, because they're going to be resistant because it's not like they're going to be real open to this kind of conversation about what's going on. So that willingness to practice that would probably be a good idea. Number two, step two. And this is again where the brain colors, if we're not careful, what we do in a way that doesn't serve us. Because the middle brain thinks if we're not anxious, we're not safe. If we're not worried about something, we're not safe. So it tries to use anxiety, worry, and fear to keep us safe, because a long time ago in our evolution, that worked really well. And the middle brain evolution hasn't caught up with society, so it's still using anxiety, worry, and fear. In other words, it has a bias to the negative. So the tendency is for us to go into this conversation focused on the problem in this person, based on our love and our caring and our wanting to help, but it comes across as us focusing on their worst, not their best, and us trying to get them to stop their worst. So, and that's because the middle brain thinks if we don't get them to stop their worst, then horrible things will happen and it'll get worse, blah, 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 blah. So instead, you want to ask yourself a question: who is this person at their best? Did they get a degree? Do they have a job? Are they really creative at something? Who are they at their best? And what that does, it keeps you from only focusing on their worst, and it gives you something to reach for. So whenever I'm talking with someone, especially someone who's resistant, I'm always holding an image of who they are at their best and always reaching for that.
Yeah, and that goes with the whole notion that what you focus on, you create more of.
And remember, these people don't have a lot of self-confidence because of the experience they're having. So when we go in holding an image of their best and kind of touching that, reaching for that, talking about that, they often rise to that perspective, because now they see that someone that they trust, someone they care about, that cares for them, sees the best in them, and it gives them an opportunity to see the best in themselves.
Right. Is it like mirroring?
It's more like if I'm talking with my son who is struggling with the disease, I know that he got a degree. Okay, and I know he had to make really good decisions in order to get a degree, or he's really creative in this particular area. So I'm imagining him doing things well and making good choices, because that's him coming from the top of the mind.
Right.
That's what that's all about.
Okay.
Step 3 is you always want to understand what's important to this person. So, and a lot of times, especially if there's been a history of kind of conflict in the past, or when we've tried to talk with them and it hasn't worked, then you can't go into a brand new conversation assuming it's a brand new conversation, because that history is coloring how they see you.
Right.
So I encourage people, if there's any kind of history of conflict or negative conversations, I encourage people to reset the relationship. And the way that I do that, I encourage them to go to them and say, hey, I've been thinking about some of our conversations in the past, maybe especially when I've been trying to, get you to make different choices. Would it be fair to say that there's been a lot of times when I wasn't really doing a good job of understanding what's important to you?
Wow. Say that one more time.
Yeah.
That one hit me right in the heart.
So and this is about resetting the relationship, because until we know what's important to them, we have no leverage. So that's why this is important. Plus, it helps facilitate a more trusting conversation.
Right.
So I go to them and I say, hey, I've been thinking about some of our conversations in the past, maybe especially when I've been trying to tell you what you're not doing right. Would it be fair to say there's been some times in the past where I wasn't doing a really good job of understanding what's important to you? And I bet they'll say yes. Okay, go. Okay. So I tell you what, I can totally see how that would be frustrating. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take more responsibility in the future of making sure that whenever we're talking, I'm working at understanding what's important to you. You think that might help our conversations? They may say, well, yeah, but you haven't never done it in the past. So I don't know if we're going to be brave about it. That's just their worry, their fear. You just let that go right by. You don't take it to heart. You're just going to go, yeah, I know. You really need to see it in order to be able to trust it. That makes perfect sense. So you don't let their, because again, this is creating a more vulnerable, open kind of relationship, and vulnerability can be scary. So you're coming in and you're owning your part of that. And if they say, yeah, but I don't know, Robert, I don't know if I can trust that, you go, hey, I get that. You got to be able to see it consistently before you can trust it.
Right.
Then if you're really brave and you want to do something really powerful, you can say, I tell you what, if anytime we're having a conversation in the future and it seems like I'm not understanding what's important to you, or not even working to understand, would you please let me know? And the reason you want to do that, sometimes we think we're doing a great job. We've read a book and it says do this and this, and I'm doing that. But it's not coming across that way. How it's coming across, their perception is their reality. So we want to be doing our best, but if it's coming across as either manipulation or not caring or some sort of psychobabble or trying to trick them into some whatever, if it's coming across that way, we want them to let us know. We want to make sure they have permission to let us know. Because if they go, hey, you said that anytime it's coming across for blah, 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 but to let you know, well, it is. Now, we want to be careful about being triggered by that. They're giving us really good information about that what we're trying to do isn't having the effect we want. Then you ask what I call a top of the mind question. And that's a question about the solution in the future, not about the problem in the past. So you say, okay, first, thank you for letting me know. So I tell you what, if I were talking to you in a way that you felt heard, understood, loved, that I was working on understanding what's important to you, what would I be doing differently? Because we think we're doing a great job, but it's not coming across that way.
Right.
So we need to go to the horse's mouth to find out, what are they looking for? Another way to do that, and by this, I think this is from Brene Brown book. I love Brene Brown, by the way.
Oh, she's fantastic.
Yeah, she's so great. And she talks about kind of talking to people saying, okay, what do you need from me right now in order to feel safe in this conversation? So it gives people an opportunity to tell us what they're looking for. And then we could go, great, I can do that. And so now we know what to do. Up until that time, we're kind of guessing at what to do.
Right.
Which is, sometimes that's all we can do. But when they say, this is really what I'm looking for, then that's really important. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. So many times we assume, and everybody assumes that we know what we're doing here, or we know what you're thinking or feeling, and just to pause and check in and ask, like, is that actually what you're thinking or feeling, or what are you thinking and feeling?
Exactly. There's a question I ask, because a lot of people say, I work with someone or someone in my family, and I can tell when they're just, they're just done. I said, okay, well, I can understand how you see it that way. Let me ask you a question. Has anyone ever thought they knew what you were thinking, but they were wrong?
Oh, great question.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
They go, yeah, it happens all the time. I say, well, given that it happens to us, we got to recognize it's going to happen from us. So let's don't assume we know what someone else is thinking. That comes across a little bit like, I know you better than you do, and more of that shutting down stuff. So we go into the conversation clear about who we want to be. We're holding an image of them at their best. We're working really, really hard to find out what's important to them. Either by them telling us or us guessing and them saying, yep, that's it. Once they say that, then we got to let them know, boy, that makes perfect sense. I can totally see how you'd see it that way. Even if they say that the solution to my problems is all cows need to be on the moon. Because cows produce methane, and methane is climate change, and that's what's causing my problem. And so the cows need to be on the moon. You need to say, you know, I can see how you'd see it that way. I can see how that would be important to you. Because otherwise they're going to be defending their perspective.
Right.
And empathy is not designed to agree with someone necessarily. It's designed to free them from the need to defend their perspective, their right to think and feel whatever they think and feel. Because as long as they're defending their right to think and feel what they think and feel, they're in a defensive or an offensive position. They're not in a receptive position.
Right.
So learning what's important to them and then empathizing with that without needing to agree, just saying, you know, I can certainly see how you'd see it that way. See how that would be important to you. And you use a magic word. And the magic word is always and, never but.
Yep.
Yeah, you never say, yeah, well, I can see how you see it that way, but you've been really screwing up. And maybe, you know, in other words, but will negate anything that comes before it. It's almost like going up to a member of your family. So, you know, I really love you, but I really love you is out the window. So it's always and, because and ties where they are to where you want to go. Right?
Yeah. So I want you to give an exclamation point on that one. I've worked with that for years. And I really do think about what I say in terms of that thing and then but versus and it's a work in progress.
Yes.
And what I would say is a lot of my coaching clients will look at me sometimes before they say, because they're like looking at me like I'm the and person. So the power of and, it just completely changes the conversation and the dynamic.
Yeah.
And so that one thing alone, Bill, if people would just play with that in their conversations and get really, really good at the power of the and cut out the but, it would change so many things.
Yeah. And if you I encourage people to just start listening to their conversations and others and just notice how often but comes up. And it'll come up, but it's a but. And by the way, however, it's just a nice but. So that, you know, you can't say however, that's still a but. It's just a nicer way to say it, but it's not good. So you say and then you move to what I call the top of the mind question, where you actually combine what's important to you with what's important to them. In this particular situation, what comes to my mind is saying something like, you know, so you go in there, you hold an image of them at their best, you find out what's important to them, you let them know, you get to say, you know, I have seen you make really good decisions. I've seen you accomplish this, and I've seen you do that. I've seen you do this with your kids or your spouse in your really positive way. I've seen you, whatever it is. And I know that, you know, whenever you put your mind to something and you know, can do it, I have every confidence in that. If I can be of help in that in any way, that would mean a lot to me. So anytime I can be of help in this process of you kind of becoming more purposeful in a way that, say, you would recommend to someone you love, that would mean a lot to me. It would be a great gift to me if you saw me as someone that you wanted to help in this way. So whenever that is the case, boy, you let me know and I'm there for you. So what that does is it plants the seed that, number one, you have confidence in them. They've accomplished things in other places in their life. Whenever they're ready, you know, this is what I guess growing up in AA, and AA never goes to somebody and say, you need to stop drinking, you know. They say, Whenever it gets bad enough, you give us a call and we'll be there, 12-step call, middle of the night, whatever it is. But we're not there to convince you of anything. We're there to show you a different way forward if that is a way you're looking for. So that's, I think, really the only way that I know how to be effective with people is to make sure that you are bringing your best to them, holding them into their best, finding out what's important to them, letting them know you get it, asking that. And so I'm just curious if in the future you ever want me to be of help, and say this would mean a lot to me. I would feel so honored to be part of any process that you feel is something that would be valuable to you. And I have every confidence that, when you decide to move in that direction, then that'll happen. And then that feels like a good place to stop the conversation, unless they're going, well, I have kind of thought of something. Hey, now here we go. But that way it doesn't come across as I am here to convince you to do what you're supposed to do kind of stuff, which I think is the challenge with that.
Yeah. And I think I completely, I can see all the things, all the pieces of what you're talking about. And I've employed a lot of those pieces to the puzzle, so to speak. What I would say is, but I also can feel internally, that mom or that dad or that spouse that is in this space of, I'm watching somebody self-destruct in front of me.
Yep.
And you're asking me to do these things as if that isn't happening.
Okay. Let me address that, because that's really good.
Great. Fantastic.
Yes. No, we know it's happening. But here's the thing. Sometimes people won't change until it becomes too painful not to. So what I'm doing is I am saying, what in my mind, I'm saying, I am trusting that there is a part of you that probably wants to change. I never have to say this. I just feel it. There's a part of you that wants to change. And sometimes I'm even say, and if it ever becomes too painful, I bet you'll do something about it. Maybe it just hadn't got bad enough yet. So sometimes people need to feel a certain amount of pain in order to be motivated to change. In fact, most people don't stop the problem because of a love of happiness and peace and serenity and sobriety.
Right.
They go, I'm just tired of waking up this way, or losing jobs, or whatever. It just becomes too painful not to. So you're not just sitting back and watching people self-destruct. You're giving them the opportunity to experience the pain as good information. And this part of them will experience that. This part of them won't. And what you're doing is partnering with the part of them that will.
Yeah. And so I think in some respects, in my own journey, it was seeing the real Sam, even with the package being caught up in addiction, and knowing that part of Sam was still there.
Yes.
And that I wanted to be, I, as his mom, wanted to be as healthy and whole as I could possibly be, so that if and when he popped out the other side, it got so painful that he chose to tackle this and really take this on, that I would be there.
Yes.
And I think, this is probably one of the hardest things that people will struggle with.
Yes. I love that. That's so important, because we want to be able, if we kind of go down the same drain they're going down, then who's around to pick up the pieces? So there is a thing that I do, and I talk about kind of having your life energy. And so this is full of our life energy. Some people give some over here, and 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 some over here, until they're drained and depleted and they don't have any to give, because they're not taking care of themselves.
Right.
There's a quote I love that says, you can't serve from an empty cup. So part of this, and by the way, then we go, wait a minute, I got to put it all back together, but it never gets all the way back together. And then we start all over again, giving some over here, giving some over here, and giving some over here. And we get drained and depleted. So we can't be of help to ourselves or anybody else. So this is about self-care, which is not only so that I can be there when he pops out, but also so that he kind of, or they have some idea of what self-care looks like. Because this person has a whole lot of trouble with self-care.
Right.
So, people see that as either selfish or denial, or no, it's really kind of making sure that there's enough of me there to handle their, the sadness that I see, but also to be there and to give them some model for what self-care looks like. So that's really, really important.
Well, I know, there's several Facebook groups out there relative to addiction. And I posted a question in one of the groups one time. I said, who believes that it's possible to thrive in the midst of the chaos of this disease? And the vast majority of the comments that came back were, that's not possible. And I have to say, even if I say that right now out loud, because this has been months, it hurts me to think that there are moms and dads and people who love people that are in the midst of this disease that really do believe that they have to be in the trauma, the drama, and the chaos and the desperation that the person who's dealing with the disease is in that same space.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, feel that if I'm okay with someone who isn't okay, then I'm insensitive to their problem. They also believe that since I've tried everything and nothing's worked, I've got to almost believe that nothing can work in order to feel like, okay, well, I guess I've done everything I can. So I guess the question is, do you just want to survive, or do you really want to thrive? Because the survival is this lower brain. Right. It's this anxiety and worry and fear and shame and guilt and anger and resentment and all this stuff that is about survival. Thriving comes from the top of the mind. And that's where if we can engage with the person from this more loving, healthy part of who we are, we show them that they're not responsible for our pain, which is another thing that happens.
Oh, geez. Again, say that one out loud.
Yeah. So that, and a lot of us have grown up, God bless our parents.
Yes, I know.
With parents who've kind of gone, oh boy, baby, if you would only see me more. In other words, trying to make us feel responsible for their unhappiness, happiness, whatever, that whole guilt perspective. So we grew up with that model. And so now, without sometimes meaning to, we transfer it onto the person. Maybe if I can just feel pathetic enough, they'll finally stop this thing out of what they're doing to me and the family.
Right.
But unfortunately, this person already feels terrible about what they're doing to themselves. And now they feel and even more terrible at what they're doing to the family. That's just all lower shame, guilt, fear, anxiety kind of stuff. So we can say, I'm going to take responsibility for me.
Yes.
I'm going to do that out of love for you and out of love for me and out of confidence in me and of confidence in you. So if you see me being okay with this, it's not that I don't care. I absolutely, because a lot of us grow up with worry and love being connected with each other.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about you if I didn't love you. It's,
right.
So it's that kind of thing. But unfortunately, the worry about them taps into their own worry about themselves and drives them deeper into that kind of fear-based, shame-based perspective. Whereas we go, I got total I've seen you do this and this and this. I know whenever it gets bad enough, hey, that kind of confidence at least shows that somebody else in the world has confidence in me. Maybe I can have confidence in me. So it's not only a healthy thing for us because it keeps us out of the mire, which is, again, easier said than done.
Right.
But if we're willing to go there and work on it and practice it, it's doable. It's not easy, but it's doable.
Yeah. And what I would say is, this is work. This does require us to retrain ourselves. And that whole notion of, I don't know who made the job description up for a parent, but whoever wrote in, we're supposed to save them from suffering and pain and all the things. Yeah. I wish I had like 5 minutes with them in a room, because that is not the job description. I finally got clear that, my role as his mom And my role with my friends and the people that I love the most is to hold the space for them to become the best version of themselves,
Right.
and to be the love in the room, and that they're on a journey, and pain and suffering is part of that journey.
Yeah.
And so if I can help them kind of lean into the gifts embedded in pain and suffering, which is it gets us cracked wide open to that next best evolution of who we are. And there's so many things to learn out of that. That's been my own experience. I think, just changing the description of who we are as a parent and how do we love in a way that serves our kids and our loved ones at the highest level possible.
Yeah. Because when we think we have to be responsible for fixing, changing, keeping them from feeling it basically says, I have no confidence that you can do that.
Right.
And that's what they're experiencing anyway. So now that gets reinforced and deeper here. But again, when we say, I know it's my job to take care of me, just like it's your job to take care of you. I'm going to do that. I want you to know that is me loving you. That is me holding the best of you. And when you're ready, boy, you just let me know. If you want my help in tackling this, we'll jump in it together. But it's that whole perspective of confidence versus fear, worry, shame, guilt, anxiety, anger, resentment, all that lower brain. Confidence is the upper brain perspective.
Right. And I want you to say a little bit more about shame, because I have spent a little bit more time in studying what it actually is, and that it drives us deeper into the disease.
Yeah.
And my understanding at this point is that, shame is really that notion that we're a bad person because of this.
Right. Regret is looking at a decision we made in the past going, if I had that to do over again, I'd do that differently. That's wisdom. Shame and even guilt is there's something wrong with me. And unfortunately, by the way, little babies are not laying in their bassinet being ashamed of crapping in their pants. So we're clear, we're not born with shame.
Right. Yes.
That is learned, and we get it a lot. And that's, again, not blaming anybody, but it's a learned perspective. So what we want to make sure we're doing is not feeling the shame of not being able to fix the person we think we're supposed to fix, and not kind of implying that shame or guilt or fear or anxiety or whatever is going to be what helps them change. So it's that recognition that we feel ashamed of maybe the fact that someone in my family has this, and it's probably something I did wrong. Oh my goodness,
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or that we can't fix them, or they won't listen to this, or whatever it is, but that's our stuff. And their shame is, hey, I know this is not a good idea, and I hadn't been able to do crap about it, and I keep doing it, and that must mean there's something wrong with me. Right. So that guilt and shame is something that's embedded in us, and it's a middle and lower brain, because remember, the middle brain thinks we have to feel bad in order to be safe. So it tries to use shame or guilt or anxiety or fear or worry or all that negative emotion to keep us safe, but it's not keeping us safe. It's just trapping us in this kind of reactive brain. But yeah, that's a biggie. It's another. If you want to really kind of get a sense of what this is all about, Brene Brown does a wonderful job with looking at shame and how it's kind of inbred without us really knowing it and meaning to. And we got to at some point kind of go, wait a minute, I am no longer going to trust shame and guilt and fear and anxiety and worry and resentment and anger as a guide to my next thought, emotion, and behavior. So, okay, then what do I trust? And by the way, this whole concept about it being work, one of the things I encourage people to do is make a list of who they are at their best.
Yeah.
And then wake up in the morning, and before you get out of bed, before you look at your phone, before you do anything, you read that list and you say, okay, what are the qualities or characteristics from this list that I want to bring to the morning, just the morning? I know some of the people I'm going to be dealing with. So you imagine going into the morning, practicing being the best of who you are. So you don't go in worried or anxious or ashamed or frightened or frustrated or all the stuff that we get triggered. Then around lunchtime, you stop, you take some breaths, maybe you do some meditation, say a prayer, take a walk around the building, do something that creates a moment of clarity and say, okay, what are the qualities or characteristics I want to bring into the afternoon? Just the afternoon. Then you do that, you practice that without needing to be perfect. Then on dinner time or sometime between the afternoon and the evening, you stop, you say, okay, what are the qualities or characteristics I want to bring to the evening? So 3 times a day, you're practicing going into life already in the top of the mind. That actually begins to rewire the brain. So if you'll do that enough, say 21 days, because it takes 21 days to change a habit, you're actually creating new neural pathways going from this middle brain to the upper brain. So you're saying, I'm going to be safe based on bringing my best to life versus worry and fear and anxiety. That can begin to have you responding differently in the future because you've got these new neural pathways.
Yes, and that's just so brilliant. I think about it in the rubric of intentionality. And, that's how I start my day. It has taken practice. And I will say that more days than not, I get to operate at a really high level and show up in the best version of who I am. And it's a continuing process and an evolution of the best version of me. It keeps evolving. And so, I set the intention, love, serve, impact every morning, and making sure that I am heart-centered and heart-led in the work that I do. And I think about the people I'm going to meet that day and how, and I ask for guidance in terms of how I show up. I realize it's not just me, that there's a little tribe around me. And so, yeah. And that intentionality, even as brief as it is, has proven to be so powerful.
I love that. A question I love to ask people is, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is your peace of mind?
Great question, Bill. I love it.
How important is it for you to be able to bring your best to any situation, regardless of what it is? Nobody's ever said lower than an 8. Most people say 9 or 10. So if it's one of the most important things in our life, then the question is, okay, what kind of effort am I willing to put in to make this a new habit? So what if learning to play the guitar would totally solve all of your problems, and you'd be a happy person for the rest of your life? People would go out and get their guitar, and they'd get to have someone teach them how to play the guitar, and they would practice the guitar every day. Their fingers would be sore, but they're still practicing because it's so important. Or learning a new language. So this is just about learning a new way of being versus kind of allowing ourselves to continue to do what we've always done. And if you'll practice it, anything we practice becomes more permanent. So it doesn't practice doesn't make perfect, but it does make permanent. And the whole idea of being willing to practice it for a period of time, let's say tops 2 to 4 months. We're going to be on the planet 2 to 4 months later anyway. What if we were good at this? How valuable would that be? So if we're willing to kind of commit to a certain 21 days, 2 to 4 months, whatever it is, of continual practice, it just gets easier and easier and easier and easier.
Right. So I'm thinking about the whole notion of being the calm in the storm. And we have a pretty big storm going on right now. Societally, culturally, all the things. And so there's another reason why I believe that your work is so critically important right now, is to show that there's another way. We can be the calm in the storm instead of the storm.
Yeah. Kind of what, when I was graduating with my PhD, I said, okay, Bill, you've learned a lot of cool stuff. How can you put it into a system, a philosophy, a framework that, number one, helps people understand what's going on, how the brain works? So it's not just, don't worry, be happy. It's understanding the neuroscience around that, and then gives them a step-by-step system. Know this, do this, know this, do this, know this, do this, to the point where if they'll keep doing it, then they will rewire the brain and recreate their experience of life. So it's so much fun kind of going around the country sharing this with people, because you can see the light bulbs going off, and you can see the the value that people are getting from it. So I call it getting paid to do what I would pay to do. So
exactly. Well, I think for, you work in the executive space, and pretty much I work in that space too. And just the notion, I mean, they tend to think in terms of results. What's the ROI? What's the return on investment here? And just the whole notion that if you're in your brainstem, you are hampered. That's using a mild word to describe your ability to make good decisions and to be creative and to be confident and all the things. And so just knowing that is transformative.
Yeah. There's a great quote from Brene Brown's book called Dare to Lead. She says, a leader is anyone, so that's pretty cool, who takes responsibility, the ability to respond, for finding the potential in themselves and others, and then has the courage to develop that potential. Like a leader, if our job as a leader and a parent is to bring out the best in everybody around us, we got to have some idea of what their best looks like. So we're finding the potential in ourselves and others, and has the courage to develop that potential. So that's a whole different than I need to get people to do the right thing or stop doing the wrong thing. That's that's a different form of influence. And I think it's a wonderful way of thinking about leadership. And I see organizations and parents and people in general moving toward that perspective of bringing out the best in others.
Well, certainly with COVID, which, I think was a massive cracking things wide open and shining a spotlight on what really matters and what doesn't, has been, I think, a great opportunity for us to re-examine who we are in the world and how we show up and what actually really is most important. And that quote speaks right to that.
I love that. And that's a good point that you bring up the COVID, because we're not living in the same world we were living in 3 years ago. And going through that as a society, the middle brain was just totally freaked out. Because not only did it seem like dangerous, it was dangerous. I mean, people were dying and it was on the TV, and so we were kind of in our face for 2 years, and people were shut down and all of our routines were changed. And so we're just kind of coming out of that going, okay, is it safe to come out of the cave now? That kind of stuff. So we got to recognize that there's a component of that in all of this as well. It's that the history of the last 2 or 3 years is now, it's impacted how we have a tendency to see the world. So we want to make sure we're seeing that from a different perspective.
Well, and the point is that we get to choose. We are at choice in terms of how we decide to see the world, how we decide to see ourselves, who we decide to be, and all the things. And I think this whole notion of choice, which is all the things that you're talking about here, it's like pause and think, who do I want to be in this scenario? Who do I want to be as a mom, a friend, a spouse, or whatever, in the midst of this disease? And it's all up.
And here's the problem. If we're not making a purposeful choice, our middle brain is making an unconscious choice.
Oh, say that again, please.
Yes. If we're not making a purposeful top of the mind choice, one that we would recommend to someone we love, one that defines who we are, that we believe is going to be effective. So it's got some criteria to it. Our middle brain is making an unconscious choice. And that's mostly based because, remember, it's biased toward the negative. So it's trying to use worry and shame and fear and anxiety and anger and resentment to keep us safe and everybody else safe. So we gotta make sure we're practicing this as much as possible. Otherwise, it's not like it's a neutral thing. If we're making this choice, it's making it from down here.
Wow, powerful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I love talking to you because number one, you are one of the most joyful people I know.
Thank you.
You take it with you wherever you go. And so, who we get to witness today, I've seen multiple times and dinners, and he is an extraordinary human being shifting the planet. That's how I view it.
Thank you.
So very grateful to have you in my life, and very grateful to have you join us today. And again, bring more insight, more intentionality, potentially different ways of viewing things for people, that you actually can thrive in the midst of this disease. And so just laying that out there for some people is going to be extraordinarily provocative. And
for those of you who want a manual for how to do it, The Life from the Top of the Mind is designed to give you a manual for how to do it. This is on Audible. Also, there is a totally free resource. It is my YouTube channel. It's got about 500 short videos on there. It just reached 1 million views. I'm so
Oh, that is so exciting.
I know, I'm so jazzed. So it's got, if 500 videos, there's probably, I know there's something on dealing with difficult people and anxiety and shame and worry and all this kind of stuff. So for those of you who are looking for 5 or 6 minutes of just me showing you how the brain works and how to use the material to that, then check that out. And if I can be of service, of course, feel free to let me know.
Great. And what I love about those videos is they are 5 or 6 minutes. So it's short, concise, to the point.
Exactly. A lot of content. A lot of, here's the problem, here's the solution. Feel free, if it resonates with you, feel free to run with it.
Yes. And I think I mentioned this last time, but I want to, put an exclamation point on it again, is Bill's book, Life from the Top of the Mind, was one of the books I went to right away. To figure out, how do I navigate this in as healthy a way as possible for myself and then for my family. And that book was instrumental. It's on our resource list, and I highly recommend it. It's written in a way that is consumable. Everybody who can read this and take things away, and mine's earmarked and underlined and, written in and all kinds of things. So it's a dynamic process when I read.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill is absolute resource, and you can go to his website at
BillCrawfordPhD.com.
There you go.
Just Google Bill Crawford PhD, and good news is I'll come up on the first page. So I'm easy to find.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Much gratitude.
Even when I'm not getting paid, which I'm not really right now, the joy of doing it is so much fun for me. So thank you for the opportunity to give some ideas, say what I love, and hopefully help some folks. So thanks for that opportunity.
Absolutely. And happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in this episode. We hope this discussion gives you the empowerment you need during these challenging times. Remember, there is always light after darkness. For more inspiring conversations like this one, subscribe to the show at voicesencourage.com/podcast. We encourage you to share with your friends and family going through similar situations, so we can continue to build a strong community of hope and possibility. Start your life-changing journey today. Join our community at voicesencourage.com.